Hello and welcome everyone to your weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversation from women in digital who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughan and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can learn more about us at www.togetherindigital.com. And this week, I'm excited to welcome to the Power Lounge, Eva. Eva is Snowflake's lead evangelist and a recognized expert in data visualization, which makes my heart happy. I love some data viz. She has published 2 books on the subject matter, on data visualization and data communities, and is currently finishing 2 ebooks. She loves writing as much as working with people in data and tech, and is passionate about helping women in one-to-one career coaching. Eva is a keen runner, excuse me, and loves traveling around England, where she made her home in 2019. Eva, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Amy.
Of course. I wish we were recording from the same room. And by that, I mean, I wish I was back in England.
It is quite special.
Maybe sometime soon. I'm so glad to have you here with us. When I was reading up and researching a little bit about you and your background, data visualization is, it's not a specialization, I would say, but it's definitely a passion point and an interest for some. What first got you interested in it?
That's a great question because it wasn't really by choice. I think I remember quite vividly when I was at university, I studied psychology, HR, and accounting. And in psychology, we learned about the Gestalt principles of visual perception. So how the human brain processes information visually. And that was really interesting. But at the time, there was no link to data visualization. And I had to do, statistics and analysis for my university degree. And I enjoyed that. I also found it quite hard. It required the most effort. It was much harder than just writing an essay. And when I came out of university, I got into IT consulting, funnily enough, even though I didn't quite apply for that part of consulting, but I was kind of shoved into that direction. And my first proper connection to data viz was using ClickView at the time in 2012. So this is 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And learning that actually with data, you can create these charts. And of course, before that, we've all touched Excel and PowerPoint, but I think at the time that wasn't really a conscious, I'm visualizing data, I'm learning something here. But exploring data visually was a very different thing then. And then 2013, I had the chance through my work at the time when I lived in Sydney and I worked for a large bank to use Tableau. And I'm like, oh, this is different. This is a game changer for me. And what I recognized was I'm not the only one who likes this. So maybe in my department, I was the odd one out because everyone else was working in Excel and using PowerPoint to then present their work. But somehow, I think through the nice people at Tableau and their nudging, I managed to get to the Tableau user group there. And I'm like, I don't even know what a user group is, but I'll show up. And there was food and drinks, and there were people spending the evening nerding out together over maps and data visualizations. I'm like, oh, I think I found my place. So those were the earliest touch points where I'm like, oh, people really enjoy doing this. So much so they spend some of their free time to get together and share what they've learned with the others so they can learn it as well. And then also sit there and absorb what someone else is teaching them. And I just found that really fascinating because I hadn't come across that whole part of what being a professional is all about.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. I agree. There's something I think it's so satisfying personally for me is because it's so left and right brained. And, when you're able to take complicated information and data and put it into something that is visual, that just helps relay that information so much more quickly that I find it beautiful. I'm just like, yeah. I love that you found your people, when you find people who, honestly can just nerd out with you unabashedly, you're in the right place because I think in that moment, it's twofold. One, you all share a passion and maybe a little bit of a purpose, depending upon the group that you're with, but you also you have knowledge and experience. So that was the topic that we wanted to dive into a little bit here today, because like you, here at Together Digital, we are big fans of peer learning. We offer a number of peer groups, dedicated peer groups for entrepreneurs, peer groups for job seekers. But, was it that moment when you were kind of sitting down and finding those folks that you really realized like this peer learning is kind of where it's at? When did you kind of first have it click for you in your career that peer learning was a definite benefit?
I think it wasn't actually until a couple of years later. So I changed jobs, and after using Tableau for a while, I realized for myself, I want to do this all the time. I don't want to do this just sometimes, maybe twice a week. I want to do this every single day, all day. So I found myself a job with a consulting company that was looking to have somebody really help them establish themselves with Tableau. So I was a consultant, but they also sent me on a train the trainer course. And that is where it clicked for me. I'm like, oh, so I could be a teacher without being a teacher. Like I never studied to be a teacher, but I could take something I know and teach it to someone else. And that could actually be a thing in my career. And I realized how much I enjoy teaching others. And these are definitely peers. These are not, more junior members or anything. I was this external consultant who came in as a trainer, as a certified trainer on behalf of Tableau to help others learn how to use the product. And that really helped me in many ways, not just teaching and understanding what it's like to do peer-to-peer learning, but also public speaking, because that's the bread and butter of being a teacher or of being a trainer, is you constantly present. They might not be, massive auditoriums. They might just be 6 people in a room, but you have to get through to them. And every person probably learns in a different way. And you have to understand that and kind of think on the spot, but also be very clear in teaching something that is deceivingly simple, but actually fairly complex when you unravel everything under the hood of a software technology like that. So to me, those were the 2 big things that were the outcomes of that time in my career. I really like teaching others and helping them figure something out that's going to be great for their career, because I've experienced that myself. But also, oh my God, I really enjoy public speaking and I want to do more of it.
That's fabulous. Yeah, I never really had thought about it in that way. And I think too, the concept and the idea of peer-to-peer learning, it's not that it's uncommon. I just don't think that it's spoken about very often. So for those who maybe, again, I try to just, everybody that's listening is coming from a different place. So maybe you've heard of peer learning before, and maybe it's been in the context of, going to university or something like that. But what makes peer learning different from a formal education or certification, in your opinion?
I'd say it removes a lot of the pressure and maybe the anxiety to, oh my God, what if I'm the only one in the class who doesn't get it? What if I'm not fast enough? What if I don't understand them? What if they don't like me? Like all these kind of things. Because when you go to a formal training course, your employer typically pays for it. And for me personally, there's always that, oh, what if I don't pass the exam? Like somebody's going to be disappointed. Will they ask me to pay it out of my own pocket? Or all those kind of thoughts. It's a mindset thing. But when you get taught by your colleagues, because maybe your colleague figured this thing out 2 months before you would have gotten there, so they can just teach you and save you a lot of time and headache, that is so much less pressure. And it is so beneficial for organizations to do that in-house, because not only to save some money, but also because there will be other people like me who suddenly realize, oh, this is really fun. I could really do this as part of my job. I could do so much more teaching and enablement in the organization, share what I learn. And having people pass on their knowledge, kind of solidifies it as well, because you can only teach if you've truly understood it. Because if you're trying to convey something, we're like, oh, I don't quite get it myself, I'm just going to fudge it. No. You have to really understand it, because people will know straight away. Imagine being a primary school teacher. If you didn't know, the kids would all just kind of poke holes in your theory. So you can just imagine how accomplished professionals would see through that straight away. And so I think for organizations, it's really beneficial. It's beneficial for the people doing it. It's beneficial for the learners, because they are all in this together. It could be that it's their teammate who knows exactly the kind of work they're doing, the type of problem they're trying to solve, and what knowledge they need to get there. So I think it can be much more effective. But of course, you don't have all the knowledge in-house. So there's still absolutely value in having external trainers come in and specialists. But if you can teach it in-house, why not? It seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I love the notion of no pressure. I love the idea of cost efficiencies. But I also love the fact that like what peer learning allows for too is that you don't have to worry about whether or not like it's learning that you may not leverage. Like how many people go and get certifications and degrees and then they never really use them. Peer learning gives you the opportunity to kind of dip your toes in the water to start to understand and learn something more in depth before you make the commitment to put dollars or time or energy against it, because obviously those are limited resources depending upon who you are.
Exactly. And I think also it can be so much more spontaneous. It could be somebody saying, I'm happy to facilitate an hour presentation or Q&A or office hour to talk about this thing that I developed. Who is interested? That can happen. If you want to get a course, well, you need to apply. Maybe there needs to be special budgets. Like it's just so much more effective and quicker to do.
Since we've touched on the fact of like, this is a beneficial aspect for organizations, before we get into the questions about individual benefits, I'm going to jump ahead a question to say like for organizations, how can we begin to encourage peer-to-peer learning to help learning and development goals within organizations? Because I don't know that I've never actually worked at a place where I've seen and heard this executed.
Yeah, so I have, thankfully, and that's still with me what we did, and this was in my time at Deloitte in New Zealand in 2011 to 2013. And what worked really well was it was part of everyone's KPIs. So you have goals for the year or for the quarter, and maybe part of that is, well, once a quarter you have to present on a topic to do some knowledge sharing. So you could reflect on a project that you completed and what your learnings were. Maybe you picked up a new piece of software. What did you learn? Like just those things. And it doesn't always have to be really advanced, really polished, and really good. It's more about the idea of instilling this culture of we can all teach each other something. And I think that's how I would approach it still today, is creating specific activities so that people can almost choose what would work for them. So somebody might say, hey, I'm not really keen on doing a presentation, but I will happily, if I'm in the office or available on Slack or Zoom, make this hour available every week or 30 minutes where anyone can ask me a question, and we can just have like a live chat or something that people can drop in on. So office hours, open door policy. Or it could be a workshop that's regular. Maybe that's once a week or once a fortnight. It could involve presentations. It could simply be everyone gets in a room or in a virtual room, they work on the same problem, and if somebody has a question, then they will fix it together. And that's something that I think we'll talk about later on with Makeover Monday as well. But also having different formats so people can, pick what they like. If somebody really enjoys writing, well, let them write blog posts or articles or FAQ documents about things that they have learned, whether that's, using Tableau, using Excel, how to do certain business processes. So documentation can be a form of peer-to-peer learning and sharing their knowledge. But it could also be, just a blog. Maybe they're a SQL expert and they're like, hey, I'm happy to share one tip a week, or keyboard shortcuts, or anything. It's just about getting started and finding really, really small ways that people can contribute, because the smaller those things are, the lower the barrier and the more likely people are to do it. And then from there, they will come up with their own ideas. It's just having a starting point.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And it makes so much sense, because the thing is that, I agree, putting it in their KPIs or putting it in their professional goals and development helps them strive for it. But then the positive impact on their end is not only being able to look back at a year where they provided that, thought leadership, but you are expressing thought leadership. You're creating subject matter experts within your own organization. And as you said, giving people the chance within the organization to speak up, which is one of my favorite things about us and Together Digital, is that, we have members come and speak because the people that are within the community themselves are subject matter experts, but they aren't often given a microphone or a stage to begin to share or even present that information. So we have members that will guest blog for us, that will come on and be podcast guests. and whatnot, because these women know their stuff. And whether or not they're ready and willing to acknowledge it, sometimes just opening up that door and giving them the opportunity is really half the battle. So yeah, that makes me really excited. And I hope some of those of you who are listening, who are in bigger organizations, just make the recommendation. I mean, people are looking to find purpose and meaning in the place that they work. And I maybe not everybody's hardwired the same way, but I do think teaching feels like a sense of giving back, and helping others. And so that could maybe be something of benefit, I feel like, for everyone. So yay, peer-to-peer learning for organizations. Go do it, y'all. All right.
And if I can add something to that, we have now, with all these digital channels, we have so many opportunities to just create our own channel. If you have something to say, you just say it. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to wait for someone to say, please teach somebody. No. Just write it on LinkedIn, write it on Twitter, write it on something. There's so many avenues, and you can build your own audience. It's great if it's in your organization, but sometimes you might have a topic. If I'm a data professional and my passion is hiking or cooking, it's not going to be so important in my workplace, but there might still be people out there who want to hear all about it. So I would then do that, take that outside of the organization and share it. And I can maybe still teach people a bunch of tips that they find useful. So don't feel like you have to be asked first. You put yourself out there, because only if you're visible will people actually be able to find you and notice you as well.
100%. I agree. And I think too, we've talked about this in the past. I'm trying to remember which podcast it was. I think we were talking about having a personality brand versus a personal brand, and really kind of owning the things that you truly feel passionate about, in the sense that, even if you do like cooking and hiking, like there could still be some association to your work. It tells you that you are creative, that you love to be out in nature, that you can endure certain things if you tend to hike, depending on where you're hiking, so I agree with you 100%. Don't wait for permission. Share those things you're passionate about.
There's always connections you can find. I remember in primary school, we had to write a process description about how to boil an egg.
Yes.
And, you wouldn't think of cooking to be useful for professional writing, but writing in a professional context, but process descriptions, if you can write a recipe, you can write a process description. So there will always be parallels, and it can be part of, like you say, it could be part of your personality brand to bring your hobbies into how that applies in a business context.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. That's such a good point. I do remember those, except here in the States, it was, how do you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? All right. What are the key benefits from an individual level? What are the key benefits of peer learning, and why do you feel it's ideal for industries like digital and tech?
Yeah, I'd say you never know what people know. I have in my work context, because I started last year when we were still not going to the office because of the pandemic and all that stuff, it took a while to actually meet all the colleagues in our European-based or in a EMEA-based marketing team. And then over time, I meet these people, and only if they happen to do a presentation do I find out some of their expertise. And I'm like, oh my God, this person is brilliant. Not that I had any doubts, but I didn't know that they were into this, into this topic, or that they were an expert data scientist for this kind of thing. I only know if I see it or if I happen to ask, but it's these unknowns. So if I don't know to ask this person about this area, I might have never found out. So because, if you put yourself out there, or if you share your knowledge, others will suddenly be like, oh my God, there's so much to learn from this person. You can have stronger connections across the whole organization, not just, in your team or the department that you work in, but really across. I think it's really, really important for your brand, but also then your career long term, because you can establish an expertise and it might reinforce what you actually want to do. For me, it was really encouraging when people said they enjoy learning Tableau from me. And sure, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people who teach Tableau. And I could have said, what do I have to contribute? Like, there's already, like, why should I do it when so many others are already doing it? But I'm explaining it the Eva way. And maybe that is really important for some people to hear, because they haven't understood it when they've heard it before. So everyone has, I love this term, onlyness. There's a great book by Nilofer Merchant called Onlyness. And
Great
one
book.
thing she says is, there is a unique space in this universe that only you inhabit. And I've kind of made that a bit of a mantra for myself. Whenever I have doubt about why should I write a blog about Tableau if there's already 200 others, maybe the way you write it is exactly how some people need to hear it. And I think that's also true for the peer-to-peer learning and the teaching, is you might explain it exactly in that way that some people will understand, and it helps them immensely in becoming better in their job, becoming more confident in doing certain techniques, learning a programming language, learning a new thing about, marketing attribution, whatever it might be. And I think we often underestimate how much impact we can have, and we don't know how much we've had until someone actually tells us, and they don't always tell us. Or it might take them a year until they're like, oh my God, what you said really helped me, and I was brave and I applied for this job and now I have it and now I'm earning twice as much. Oh my God, I had no idea. So I think sometimes we just have to keep doing the thing, even if we don't have the obvious confirmation, because the confirmation will come later on, but it comes like a flood wave. So yeah. So did I answer the question?
You did.
Yeah,
You did. It was wonderful. And I got to see her speak on loneliness several years ago at the 3% conference. And it was such a fabulous talk because, and I think you reiterated it several times there, but what we learn when we learn from one another is not just like the nuts and bolts, but perspective. And the way that we learn, everybody learns differently. My husband's a teacher for applied math. He has always been, math is a breeze for him. It was a struggle for me. What makes him a brilliant mathematician and teacher, in my opinion, is the fact that he doesn't just teach the way everything quote unquote should be done. He wants to learn and understand how you learn and understand. And that way he can teach you in a way that makes sense to you. Now, not every teacher is going to be able to do that, but by talking to more than one person about a certain topic or a particular matter, you get more perspective. So for instance, I mean, we've probably talked social media, even lately, like Instagram has been a big topic for the podcast and a few of our in-person events. And I'm always floored because each woman that comes up to speak kind of brings, again, like her own perspective. She talks about tactics and strategies, but the approach may be different, or the results or the outcome of what she experienced might be different. And when you're talking social media, there's so many unknown algorithms, obviously. Gathering more input and experience is to your benefit. It's going to add to your ability, to the ability to succeed when you're a little blind to certain things. So I was kind of wondering too, do you feel like peer-to-peer learning in industry, specifically in digital and tech, what might be some of the advantages there?
Yeah, I would say that if you compare it, especially to university education or official, like publicly accessible courses, they can lag a little bit behind because they have to build a curriculum. They have to go through approval processes. When I look at universities now, what they offer in terms of analytics, for example, if you just learn it from your colleague who's been to conferences, who's done their own like studies through, Reddit and other websites, and they've just figured it out, you will be much closer to the pulse than you would be if you wait for university to catch up. Yes. That's not a criticism of university, it's just a different approach. And they have, because they're educating a huge number of people, they have to have a different process and a robust curriculum, but it lags behind unless industry can be really closely involved and maybe come in to teach. But even then, that doesn't, I think, keep up with the pace that we are seeing, especially in this industry. So learning from others, and I've mentioned conferences. I think conferences are hugely beneficial because you can attend very specific like technical streams or industry streams, different subject areas, but also making all those valuable connections. And there are so many people out there who literally share their knowledge for free quite happily. They publish on YouTube, they have extensive blogs, they write books that are free or fairly small cost, where you can learn so much from them. And they are truly passionate about what they do, and they want to always be up to date, and they know all the features and all the functions and all the latest stuff. So learning from them, I think, when you're a professional, keeps you much closer to the current knowledge. So I would say that's a massive advantage and for the industry.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's always changing, and it's changing so quickly. Having additional perspectives and others, peer-to-peer learning definitely, in my opinion, puts you ahead of the crowd. And again, no knocks against formal education, but you're right. I mean, some of those things, I mean, I joke about it often, but rather than going to like university, I went to an art college in Chicago. And one of the main benefits, though, was the fact that every single teacher that I had was a current professional. So they taught at night because I was working during the day and going to school at night. But they were graphic designers, videographers, working in agencies as creative directors. And what was brilliant about it was not only were they my teachers and they were teaching me kind of, exactly the things that they were working through the curriculum, but then also like what they were working on. They were great mentors for me and absolutely helpful connections when I left school to go then get internships and jobs and whatnot. So yeah, I think having people who are in the work currently able to share their learning and experience, it's so invaluable. So yeah, generous folks out there.
It totally is. And I benefited when I lived in Australia and worked for the bank and first came across Tableau. Tableau there was still pretty young in Australia. They only had 5 employees in the whole country.
Wow.
And they happened to be 3 of them in the next door building. And because I was working for the bank, so we were a big customer, I could just call them up and say, can you help me? And if he was free, he would literally sit next to me at the desk and he would walk me through stuff. And that's my style of learning. If I have to figure it out on my own, I'm quite fearful that I'll break something, that I'll do it wrong, that I don't know where to start. If somebody just show me once, and I'll be happy to experiment all day. But I don't like getting started on my own. So it was really nice having him sit there and he taught me so many like shortcuts and best practices that I thought when you try to do it on your own or you're learning from books, it can be a challenge because your exact situation might not be reflected. So you're like, oh, but I have a different error message. So what do I do now? But if somebody can just tell you and can explain it to you until you get it, if you're like, oh, didn't quite get that, can you say it differently? And they're like, oh, let's try this example. And it's so important. And I literally had him sit next to me and I'm like, oh, now I understand. It made a huge difference. And much like you, I then had connections that helped me, while they didn't exactly give me a job, they were always really close connections in my professional network that I still value and appreciate to this day. We still talk, I follow them. And it's just nice to also recognize for me later on what contribution they made and to remind them how important they were in my beginnings.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great part to play in somebody's career. I love that. Yeah. And peer learning, there was something else I was going to say, and then I completely blanked. It's Friday. I don't remember what it was now. It'll come back to me. Yeah. I just can't emphasize enough how much I think I agree with you. Maybe it's just the way my brain's hardwired. I think I've always been more of a social learner and learning by doing versus picking it up from a book and being tested and seeing real world applications as well. Now I remember what it was that I was going to ask or say. And it was that you asked for help. I think a lot of times when we are trying to learn something new, that kind of actually gets to a question that I skipped to. So maybe I don't want to answer the question I'm going to ask you, but one thing I've definitely noticed with a lot of our members is, when there's something new for them to learn versus asking openly, honestly, vulnerably that they need help or want to learn from someone, they will go online and they will Google for hours. They will sign up for certifications and take workshops and things like that. Not to say that's the wrong way to go. But I think sometimes asking is just like such a big key aspect of getting the ball started on peer learning. But when it comes to peer learning and seeing as how the majority of our audience are women, what do you see, if anything, that holds us back from peer learning, maybe within the context of women especially?
I would say it's definitely not wanting to be perceived as not knowledgeable. So I'm hugely inspired by my partner, who is one of the foremost teachers of Tableau in the world. And he has questions and he will just ask people. And I'm like,
great.
Wow, he's so unafraid. But he also wants to instill that in everyone he teaches, that they ask questions. And he gets upset if people don't ask him enough questions. He trains people in data analysis, and he will tell them, you have to ask me questions, and he will coach them to ask him questions because he will be the customer. And that to me was really inspiring. And also seeing him as a teacher, never judging anyone for not knowing something. And after 15 years of using Tableau, he's still very happy to answer the most basic questions, which I admire, that patience, because I might not have it in that situation. And to me, that's been like, okay, I need to ask more questions. Now, I will admit, I'm still not great at asking questions for my own knowledge. I think I've become much better at asking questions when I want to help somebody. So, you know, in my coaching, or if I'm mentoring somebody, I think I've become much better at teasing out things and trying to get to the crux of the problem. But for me to ask for clarification, to get some knowledge, it still takes a bit of courage, especially because if I feel like, oh, I should know this by now. But sometimes I just challenge myself and I'm like, Eva, just ask about this acronym, what it means. And I'll just say, and nothing happens. The world doesn't crumble around me. There's no earthquakes, no swords, you know, being stabbed. Like, it's just fine. People will just say, oh, this is what it means. And it helped me become a bit of an advocate for, let's talk plain English. Let's do away with the jargon and all the technical terms and all this special language. Let's not assume people know. If we're teaching people something, let's start with a layperson's perspective. And if they know already, they will say, oh, yeah, I get that. Let's move on. But if they don't understand, they will not say it. So I would say asking questions is probably one of the best skills to develop. And I will also clarify asking good questions. And by that, I don't mean, oh, they have to be really smart. I think they just have to be thought through. So rather than asking a very general question that wouldn't even give you good results on Google, thinking, what information do I need to give the other person so they can actually help me? For example, if I want to understand how to, you know, do a piece of analysis, I might say, hey, I've tried A, B, and C. I can't figure it out. How can I get to do this and then this? Like telling people what you've tried or which part you don't understand, rather than just saying, can you help me do this analysis? So that's what I call the lazy question. So I try and encourage people to really think about the question they're asking, because in my experience, and I count myself as one of those people, if you give someone a really good question, you will get so many great answers, and people will be much more likely and happy to spend 5 minutes of their time writing you even like quite a detailed response. But if they have to spend those 5, 10, 15 minutes just to figure out what you're actually asking, that's when you don't really get anywhere. So I think if anyone, people make the effort to think about the question, provide enough context so people know what they're genuinely asking. Oh, they're going to be blown away by the answers they get, but also probably the connections they make with other people and the network they're building, because people are like, oh, I really enjoyed helping that person. I want to stay connected.
Absolutely. Yes, I love that, because we do a lot of asks in Together Digital. We have a whole channel on Slack for our members just to post asks. I think I've seen 3 posted already today, and 100% the thing that we go for when somebody asks a question is context, because it does help bring clarity to the situation so you can truly be helpful versus giving a blanketed statement or comment or whatever. And I think the questions that are, you're right, that are more pointed and thought out always tend to have the better answers. And then the other thing I think about, you know, asking, the ability to ask questions is a bit of a muscle that you have to build up. You know, it's something that you just have to get used to doing. It's going to feel awkward and uncomfortable, but after a while, it's a weight that gets easier to lift. And I think also, you know, the people in the room that are listening, usually when you have somebody in the room that is just asking phenomenal questions, everybody in the room just feels a little bit lighter. Because, you know, you're basically asking the things that they're probably thinking and too afraid to bring up themselves. And it's like, oh, I have the answers I need, but I didn't have to be the one to speak up. But don't be that person that sits and waits. Like, speak up, ask those questions. Don't be shy.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we are interested in trying to initiate more peer learning for ourselves on an individual basis, how do we get started?
So I would say picking a topic. And it could be anything. For me, it was a real game changer to realize what are the things that really make my eyes light up. I love talking about this topic. I love talking about building communities. I love talking about women's careers in data and tech and all the opportunities they can have. That's the stuff where I will talk about it at a barbecue. I will talk about it to my parents if they're willing to listen. I will talk about it in the middle of the night if somebody wakes me up. So that's really good criteria or really good candidates for, that's something I can maybe teach someone else. Because if you're excited, that will come across. And any topic can be made exciting if the person delivering it is excited by it, if they're interested. If it feels like, oh, there's a lot of work, you will probably not really stimulate a lot of enthusiasm in the audience or in the people learning from you. So I would say pick a topic that I don't even know if it has to be passion, because it's not always passion. It's sometimes like you're really good at it. You might become passionate, but maybe for now you're just really good at it, or you're really excited that you figured out this really complicated, data science, this really complicated model that you built, or something like that. So picking that, and it could be, and this might require a bit of courage, but suggesting to the team, hey, I just did this and I would love to share with the team what I did, because you might find that really helpful. An example from what we're doing in our EMEA marketing team at Snowflake is we want to help each other learn more about the product itself. Our technology is amazing. It is simple on the surface, but it actually is complex when you dig a bit deeper, because it's database technology, it's cloud, like there's a lot going on. So we recognize not everyone understands all those nuances, and we want to help people understand that better. So we said, how could we do that? Well, could we pick parts of it, and whoever's comfortable teaching it just teaches it, and everyone who's interested in learning it because they don't know it, they can join. So opening it up and just seeing who shows up, even if only one person shows up, if that person then understands it, you've made a big difference. And it also, I think, aside from the obvious value of teaching somebody something about a topic, it's always about teaching them about the idea that they can teach as well. It's the role model function we should never underestimate. It's sometimes why I speak up about topics that I've, where I'm like, this is a conviction of mine. I don't necessarily want to be attacked on social media, but I will speak up about it because I know people are watching. And so I think pick a topic that you like to talk about, offer to teach it to people for the reason of conveying knowledge, but also inspiring them to teach, and to then broaden that and establish that as a bit of a cultural shift for more people to do peer-to-peer teaching and learning. You could say everyone who, don't tell them ahead of time, once they attend your class or your session, encourage them to do the same, to maybe say, well, next week, who would be happy to teach something for 5 minutes? And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be slides. It doesn't have to be an hour. Just ask the next person to do it so that you keep the momentum going, and they can nominate someone else, or, you can always have volunteers. And if you have more than one person, you can already schedule out sessions. But I think when you have everyone there and when you have their attention, that's when it counts to actually say, okay, who's going to do the next one? Because we want to keep this going.
That's so fantastic. I love it. That's such a great notion and idea. It perpetuates. It's something that perpetuates itself. So yes, learning, sharing, giving, and then encouraging others to teach. I think that's brilliant. All right. Does our live audience that's listening have any questions? I'm going to give you all time in a second to ask, since you're here. Y'all been quiet.
I couldn't quite follow the chat. I know that Julie has put some links in there as well.
Yep, she found the link for Onlyness and dropped that in there. Our personality brand with Danielle Hughes, that conversation that we did a few weeks back, and some more power lounges that are coming up and ways to connect with you. All right, well then we will wrap up and end on, I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk about Makeover Mondays, because I think it's a great example of all that we've been preaching here today. So let's chat for a moment about Makeover Mondays and how did it get started, and why should our listeners check it out?
Yeah. So Makeover Monday originally started many, many years ago when Andy, my partner, who back then wasn't my partner, didn't even know him back then, but he wanted a way to practice using Tableau and improving his data visualization skills. So he said, I'm just going to take a visualization that I find on the internet, I'll find the data and I'll create it in Tableau, but I'll do something nicer. Like he wanted to improve on what he found. And then it became a community project in 2016 where they would publish, so him and the guy from Tableau did it together, and they would publish the data set so that anyone else who wanted to do it would also be able to join. And we had a bit of a hiatus because, you know, life, pandemic, all these kind of other forces at work. And now we said, we should kick this off again. And it's funny because people, I think, were sad when it stopped. It was very popular. We had, I think at the peak, about 2,500 people a year joining in, well over 10,000 visualizations being created. We had live sessions at conferences, user groups. Like, it was a really big community project, the biggest one in the Tableau community, but also beyond. It was very popular. And Andy said, well, I actually I want to do more in Tableau. He teaches it, but he doesn't get to use it as much as he wants to. So it's like, I'm going to create my reason again, and I'm going to just relaunch this project. We're just doing a bit less admin overhead this time around. And so what it is every week, hence Makeover Monday, Andy publishes a visualization and a data set that he found on the internet. And with the ask of, hey, take this data and create something that's better. Try if you can improve getting this message in the data across. And people can participate whichever tool they want. They can access the data. It's typically in an Excel format or CSV format, so something very easy on data.world. And they can create a visualization. Ideally, they make it publicly available. So whether it's through Tableau public, like you can share a picture, a link, whatever. And the whole thing that happens on Twitter, because Twitter is a very public platform, you don't even have to have an account to participate or to watch things happen, but also because we don't want people just to share, but to also be discovered. Over the years, many people have managed to score new jobs because of their involvement and what they've learned through this project and the skills they built. So people participate, and on a Monday, they can watch Andy's live stream where he builds his own, and people can watch him go through his thought process. On a Wednesday, I take a few selected submissions from the week and I give people feedback and just talk about, you know, what's the impression I have from this? What do I understand? What do I not understand? So people can really learn from it as well. And beyond creating something, they're like, oh, actually, I could improve what I've created. And, you know, it just kind of continues that way. So it's a way to work with ready available data that's cleaned up, ready to go. They don't have to hunt it down themselves, and they can just practice a very useful skill. And for me, doing those review sessions was always the most fun part. I enjoy building visualizations, but if I have to spend an hour of my time, I would rather give people feedback and help them figure out how to make something better. So that's the bit I'm focusing on, whereas he's focusing on, you know, building the visualizations. And it's a great way. There's multiple benefits. It's practicing the skills, the technical skills. It's networking because there's so many participants, being inspired by others. So seeing what do others create with the same data. But it's also helping others. So there's teaching. So if somebody has a question that they pose, anyone can answer it. And finally, it's having an impact on, you know, the industry and the wider community of, oh, there's all these other visualizations now that people can utilize. And sometimes, you know, if it's a more impactful topic, maybe for a nonprofit, then that really makes a real world difference as well.
That's wonderful. It's such a good example of peer learning and how it can lead us to get better together, which again is so much what we're all about. So this topic was just perfect. Together Digital, we're always about ask, give, grow, and you know, being more of a collective and a community than a networking association. Because like you said, these are opportunities to learn new perspectives, new tools, you know, new hard skills, new soft skills, while actually making connections. It just doubles the delight that it is in learning when you kind of can have all of those factors involved. So Eva, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I love all that you're doing. And everyone check out Makeover Monday on Twitter. Julie dropped the link to the website as well as the hashtag on Twitter into the chat for our live audience. Eva, thank you so much. You have a fabulous evening, and I hope we get to talk again soon.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Take care.
All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.